Hey guys, welcome to the Bill Barnwell Show. I am Bill Barnwell. We're going to start this week recapping, I suppose, what's happened in free agency. Obviously still plenty of free agents out there, but the vast majority of the cash has been spent. We've seen some big trades, some surprising moves. We've seen some trades that didn't happen. We're going to talk about all that this week, talking about the AFC. Next week we'll hit the NFC. But joining me, talk about the AFC today, a fan favorite, a commonly asked for guest on social media, in my email, beloved member of the podcasting community. You can see his work, read his work, listen to his work on CBS. It's our friend JP Acosta. JP, how are you?
It's good. It's good. I'm doing well. It feels good to have the support of the fans. It feels like how everybody's sort of like getting behind this indie wrestler Ricky Sosa right now. I feel like the football media Ricky Sosa.
That's why you're a beloved member of the community. You're like, well, what would I compare this to? An indie wrestler. That is me. You have graduated past indie wrestling, my friend. You have the credibility of an indie wrestler still, but you are a televised national star.
See, and now we're sort of getting into like the who would that be? Like sort of new TV star. Like I'll go with like Kevin Knight.
Kevin Knight, yeah, that's a better one. Kevin Knight would be a good example. Clearly on the come up, you see the talent, you know he's a star already. Just a matter of when will he take over? That is the fear I have every day. When will the Bill Barnwell Show be taken over by JP Acosta? No, it's obviously a blast to have you on. Very excited to talk AFC free agency with you. Some interesting situations. Obviously, the Max Crosby stuff has come and gone. We'll see what happens there. Some trades to discuss. I just want to go team by team, and I want to get your thoughts on how you think these teams did, if they got what they needed to get, if there's still work to be done, if you don't like a move, if you like a move. I'm going to be very open and leave the floor to you for these teams. And I'll start in the East, because I have an East Coast bias, obviously. I'll start with the Buffalo Bills, who do trade for DJ Moore. They signed Bradley Chubb. They let David Edwards go. Still a lot of defensive players on this team in free agency. Joey Bosa, Daquan Jones, Larry Ogunjobi, Matt Milano, Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, Shaq Thompson. I mean, either guys who have been there forever or guys who were playing a lot of snaps last year. I know they're changing from Sean McDermott to Jim Leonard, a defensive coordinator, but JP, do you feel like the Bills are settled? Like, do you think they've done enough this offseason to deliver on whatever mandate ownership has given them in terms of not having the same thing that happened last year happen in 2026?
I don't think so, but I also think they're banking on their drafting and their evaluation helping to bridge that gap. So, you know, you're leaving out Joey Bosa is going to be gone. He's going to be entering free agency. I don't think he's going to be coming back. Matt Milano, Shaq Thompson, also probably not going to be returning to this team. It feels like they're finally being forced into what I hope the Bills would do a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago, which is finally looking themselves in the mirror and being like, we have to turn this roster over. All great teams eventually have to filter out the aging veterans and start to get a little younger, get a little faster. And that's something the Bills are starting to do, but it's sort of taken a scheme and like scheme change for them to do it. So it feels sort of like, yes, this is where you need to be going, but also there's a lot of steps you have to take to get there. You still need a true nose tackle to take some hits off of Ed Oliver. You need somebody who can play a little bit 4-eye so you can still allow Deion Walker to do what he does best, which is more gap penetration. You still need a couple of linebackers to sort of back up Terrell Bernard and also play next to him because Bernard hasn't been able to stay healthy. And then you still have some of the offensive issues that also haven't really been addressed yet. So it feels like there's still holes on this team, but also they're thinking they have Josh Allen, so that's probably gonna close the gap wherever they end up.
It does. And I sort of wonder, you know, do you feel like this offensive receiver room is settled? Because the Bills, and this blows my mind, but according to Spot Track, it's true, they are spending the 6th most cash of any team in football at wide receiver. And yet the teams ahead of them, you're like, okay, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, we're good. Like, we spent money, but we have a room we feel great about. I look at the Bills wide receiver room and I'm like, kind of want more than what I have there, no?
They shouldn't be content with where they are with this receiver room because adding DJ Moore via trade is sort of to me, it sort of amplifies some of the body types and the skills that they have on the roster. DJ Moore is great after the catch and explosive downfield. He combines what Khalil Shakir does yards after the catch wise with some of the explosive downfield capability. But you still have that worry of if it's 3rd and 7 and you need somebody to separate on the outside, who are you going to trust?
Yep.
And I sort of hoped when the trade happened, I was sort of hoping that they would still keep that 2nd round pick so they can use it on a receiver on the outside. Or if they want to use that 1st round pick for a receiver, I still think they should, because they need different flavors, need different body types in that room. I compare receiver rooms a lot to starting fives in basketball. You have this roster feels very like heavy on the same type of player. And you just need somebody, if it's the 4th quarter, you need somebody to go get you a bucket. And I think they can still add to that room in that way instead of sort of doubling down on constantly having to run mesh and mesh return to get guys open.
I knew we were going to get a mesh complaint during the Buffalo Bills conversation. I mean, they ran mesh. They ran super mesh downfield. They ran mesh hook and ladder last year. I mean, we are on very different ends of the mesh spectrum. I love it. I know you are the internet's biggest mesh hater. Last year, when I watched the Bills tape, I was like, JP might have a point. This is a little too much even for me. So just having a guy who can win against man coverage as opposed to having to win with scheme versus man coverage feels like it would be a big step forward for the Buffalo Bills. And that offensive line, now to me, is a little bit in question. They did get Connor McGovern back before the center market blew up, but they lost David Edwards to the Saints. All these spots were like, okay, well, they could address this in the draft. They could draft a guard. They could draft a wide receiver. They could draft a edge rusher. They could draft a defensive tackle. Like, okay, they don't have a 2nd round pick. So they're down like a decent amount of draft capital. So I am really intrigued to see where they actually do end up spending that draft capital, because then I wonder if they're going to use maybe the post-June 1st market to try to go after some vets to fill in the gaps they don't fill in on draft day.
That guard spot to me is really interesting, because before you could think that the Bills will somehow find a way to make it work with whoever they have at left guard. But on top of all the people that they lost that played on the field this season, Aaron Cromer retiring also takes a major hit out of that offensive line. I think when you look at sort of the hierarchy of coaches outside of the head coach and position coordinators, having a great offensive line coach is an automatic multiplier to your offense. It gives you such a wide margin for error. And now that you don't have that offensive line coach, you're going to be bringing in a new guy at left guard. You're going to have a new offensive line coach. It's going to be really different this year for Buffalo. There's going to be a lot of different. And I'm just wondering with the offensive line, because that was one of their biggest strengths, how come they didn't try and retain the one strength that they have that isn't Josh Allen?
Yeah. I mean, they lose Ryan DeMark as well to a restricted free agent offer sheet. Look at Spencer Brown. I mean, the way Aaron Cromer developed Spencer Brown from a guy who was a liability at times to being a Pro Bowl caliber right tackle, that alone paid for a lot of what Aaron Cromer brought to the table. So major questions to me still with the Buffalo Bills. Different sorts of questions about the Miami Dolphins, a lot of which we covered last week with Marcel Louis-Jacques about the idea of them tanking, about what happens post-Jalen Waddle trade. Marcel gave some really valuable insight into how the Dolphins view their core, said basically, the priority for them has been Devon Achane, Jordan Brooks, Aaron Brewer, Patrick Paul. That's going to be the guys they build around. But JP, as you look at an organization that let a lot of veterans leave, not unreasonably so, given their contracts, the only players who have gotten more than the minimum for Miami this offseason are Malik Willis and Greg Dulcich, who signed for $3.5 million. So I guess I wonder, do you feel like the Dolphins are done? Do you think they should be more aggressive in shedding talent? Where do you stand on sort of what the next steps are for the Dolphins post Jalen Waddle trade this offseason?
I think the Dolphins are done adding people in free agency because they have a boatload of day 2 picks. This season feels sort of like an eat your vegetables kind of season for this Dolphins team, this Dolphins front office, because of all the spending that they did on the Mike McDaniel era of the Dolphins roster, they had to turn that over. So now you're sort of sitting in a tough cap situation. You go out and sign Malik Willis, is sort of being like, hey, we're going to give you a shot and see what happens. But this upcoming season feels like for them, it's going to be about, like you said, finding out who are going to be core Dolphins for this era, this Jeff Hafley era of Dolphins football. Maybe they add some more size to that receiver room, which they need. Maybe they add 2 or 3 corners within the first 2 or 3 days of the draft because they just have to. Because even with all the picks that they have, they still have a lot of needs. But this is where it sort of feels like every Madden GM's like dream, where you have just nothing on the roster. You have maybe like 4 core players, nobody else really on this roster for a lot of money or for a long time, and a boatload of picks. Just completely revamp the entire thing.
Yeah, 3 of those guys I mentioned earlier in the final year of their respective contracts. I smiled as you were talking because I looked up the Dolphins' dead cap number for 2026. Do you know what it is?
It's astronomical. I can't remember what the exact number is.
$179 million.
Oh, no. Oh my gosh.
Dude, the cap was $179 million a few years ago.
This
incredible.
Feels like the come down after you like go to Vegas and you're going just like hit me. And you're like, oh wow, I actually lost money this time.
Yeah, no, this is sobering up on the plane home, on the red eye home for the Dolphins. You said eating your vegetables. That is generous. I mean, you're right. Like, it doesn't feel like they need to be adding more players in free agency. But like, I do think about the Devon Achane situation because they've come out and been very explicit. We don't want to trade Devon Achane, but that's like, well, you traded Jalen Waddle. Devon Achane's good, but like that's a running back you're signing to an extension this year. I guess the question I ask for you is like, is there a price tag for you where if you're the Dolphins front office, you go from saying, yeah, we're keeping Devon Achane to maybe we will trade Devon Achane. Like, is there a first round pick? Is it a second round pick? Like, what is that draft compensation someone has to offer you that you feel like you're willing to change your mind on Devon Achane?
I think it would have to be around a second round pick because Achane's also going to be asking for a new contract, which is going to obviously play into what trade capital you're going to get. And I also think the Dolphins want Achane to be around, especially for what he offers as a runner and receiver and sort of versatility that he brings. But when you say that, obviously everybody else would like to have a guy like that as well. So it's going to be difficult for them, especially as they enter this new era, to keep guys on the roster happy when you don't reward the players that have put in a lot of work for you already. And I think that team and roster dynamic is going to play so important in a roster that's going to be relatively new, relatively turned over. You have to have, like, I know culture is very like thrown around like buzzword, but it does matter to have guys who are happy and want to be there, and those veterans as they lead you into this next era. And I think Achane is seen as one of those veterans. It would take a round 2. I don't know if it would take a round 1, but I'd have to be looking for a round 2 to move off of Achane at least this year.
Yeah, I think that's the conversation you have to have. It's just like, it has to be more than just typical value for a running back with 1 year left in his deal, because even if you keep him, like, maybe he's not going to be the same guy in 4 years when you are ready to contend, but he's going to make life easier for your quarterback when you get him. He's going to make life easier for Malik Willis, who like does not have a ton around him right now. So I could see them keeping Achane. I do think that even if he's not going to be the same player in terms of his production, I still think he's going to be a valuable piece for this offense in the next couple of seasons. Patriots, like, very much a 1 in, 1 out situation. Stephon Diggs gets cut. They sign Romeo Doubs. They move on from Caleb Chason, who had a really good year. They bring in Draymond Jones. They trade Garrett Bradbury to the Bears. They bring in Elijah Vera Tucker and move Jared Wilson to center. They sign Kevin Byard. They let Jalen Hawkins leave. Do you feel like the Patriots are in a better spot roster-wise this year than they were last year?
I feel like they're in a similar spot where I think you move off of Diggs for Romeo Doubs, who sort of offers that super wide receiver 2 part of the offense. You still need a wide receiver 1, which is sort of my thought on the Patriots is they're still waiting for June 2nd to call the Eagles back and see if they can get the A.J. Brown deal done. But I just think that they are they're sort of treading water a little bit, and it makes me a little nervous because for all young teams that sort of overachieve
Mm-hmm.
in 1 year, the whole thing idea is we'll just run it back. We can do this again because we'll get growth. But
Yep.
the issue is everybody else in the NFL gets better too.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to fall behind. And the biggest worry for the Patriots for me is that they didn't do enough to address the pass rush, at least in non-blitzing situations. Obviously, Milton Williams, fantastic. Draymond Jones can offer you some fun moments as a pass rusher, but I just think they need to add somebody else with a little more juice to that pass rush room. Hopefully, you can get healthy Harold Landry back. You have 31st pick. You can still address that spot, but I just hope that they don't stay content with where they are right now.
Yeah, I mean, still pieces to be added. There's still a bunch of older veteran edge rushers out there. They could add one of those guys to the mix. The Dobbs-Diggs thing is interesting because, like, Diggs, by all the metrics I can find, by yards per route run, by receiver score, he was an incredible player last year. He was like a top 3 receiver on a route-by-route basis, but he was playing 52, 55% of the snaps, like some weeks more, some weeks less, but he was a part-time player. He was really efficient when he was on the field, but just not playing very often. And so with Dobbs, I wonder if like the benefit comes from him just being on the field more often. Like if he's playing 75, 80% of the snaps, even if he's not as efficient as Stephon Diggs, at least he's around more often. I think that maybe is why, obviously the off-field stuff with Diggs comes into play too, but like I wonder if that's maybe the way the Patriots on the field benefit from having Dobbs. But I agree with you. I think there's still concerns about the offensive line. Vera Tucker's a good player, but he's missed significant time with injuries as a pro. I don't know if Jared Wilson's going to be a good center. We'll see. I think they could add another edge rusher. And the big thing is the schedule's going to get much tougher. Like they're going to play stiffer competition in 2026. So I think they have to be better than they were this year on a schedule adjusted basis for them to be a contender again in 2026. And they might do that. I mean, they have a great quarterback, but I mean, you mentioned like there have been teams who have made breakthroughs really quickly who have come back to earth in some ways the following year. And it's been because they have thought they were closer than they were, and maybe that added the level of talent they needed to add during those respective off seasons.
Yeah, it just feels like for them, if they can just add another complementary pass rush piece, if you can just,
Yep.
I think something that's happening with the NFL defensively, especially defensive line, is just getting pass rush in waves. You rotate guys in and out. If you can get guys who are complementary pass rushers who can win in different ways. So, you have Draymond Jones, you have Harold Landry, both guys. Like Jones is a little stronger, a little bit heavier set. So I think that's why they went with him over Tyson. But I think having a guy that can win in one-on-one situations, having a guy that can sort of make Harold Landry be a little bit more of a part-time player at least, so you can keep him fresh to finish the season. I think that'd be really helpful for them. But yeah, I just want to make sure that for them to make sure that they're always trying to get better. That's something that the Belichick teams, like I know it's like bringing up Bill Belichick is sort of like, well, I don't know with the Patriots, but Belichick's teams never stop trying to be better in the offseason. So I hope the Patriots, Mike Vrabel, look at that and go, we have to stay on the cutting edge if we're going to get back to the Super Bowl again.
Is there a position you would like them to go in the first round if they don't add a player between now and then? Would it be edge? Would it be wide receiver? Where would you like to see them go in the first round?
I think I would go edge or I'd go offensive line, especially sort of given the situation with Morgan Moses, personally. A little bit older. You want to try and build for the future as well. But I would lean edge primarily because this edge class, while it's not like has like superstars, I think they're all very fun players, very quality players. And the guys towards the back end of round 1, early round 2 sort of fit that Mike Vrabel like prototype, the style that they want, and the complementary pass rush ability. And then at tackle, I think guys like Blake Miller, Maxi Honachor, I think both those guys will really fit at right tackle if you are truly, truly content on giving Will Campbell another year to figure it out at left tackle. I think just continuing to add youth to this team is going to be really helpful.
Yeah, I think line, either offensive or defensive, is where I would like them to go. New York Jets, weird offseason to me in a lot of ways. Like, yes, you bring in Geno Smith for basically a salary dump. Makes sense. You have nothing at quarterback. Moving on from Justin Fields, makes sense. No problem. Trade for Devontae Sweat, no problem. Good interior, good interior defender in a situation where there's not a ton of great defensive tackle talent in free agency. You trade Jermaine Johnson, a former first round pick who was pretty productive, but understand that move. Minka Fitzpatrick, Demario Davis, Dane Belton. Like, I understand they need veterans in the building. I understand the culture kind of faded after they traded away Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner last year, but like, is Demario Davis like? I don't think Demario Davis is still a really good run defender. Like, this team is bad. Like, do you think those moves are warranted given where the Jets are?
I actually kind of like them, especially for
Ooh,
a
okay.
team as young as they are. Having
Mm-hmm.
those veterans in the room, especially for that front seven, if you're going to, like, if in this hypothetical, we're assuming they're going to draft Arvell Reese at the second overall pick, having a
Yep.
guy like Demario Davis next to him to sort of walk him through the NFL and playing linebacker full time is going to be really helpful. I sort of like the acquisitions of Kingsley Enagbare. I like Joseph
I like
Osai for
Edinburgh.
what they are. I think they
Mm-hmm.
are both secondary, like, pass rushers. And when you have Will McDonald already, you have T'Vondre Sweat, you've sort of, with Sweat, you've already like boosted your run defense when you get him
Mm-hmm.
to truly like lock in and play. But Will McDonald, Enigbari, Osai all feel very similar in how they win as pass rushers, which makes me sort of feel like if you add a guy like Arvell Reese to that mix, like this could be a very, I'm not gonna say they're gonna be good, but they'll at
Mm-hmm.
least be fun, especially with Aaron Glenn calling the plays, calling that defense. I think Minka I was a little like, huh, that's interesting. I didn't think they would be the Minka team.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think about what Aaron Glenn has wanted in his safeties, he wants that versatility and somebody who's not afraid to sort of stick their nose and make plays in the run game.
Yep.
I feel like Minka sort of fits that role. And again, just provide some veteran leadership and just bodies in the secondary because they just need to throw. I said they need to throw picks and money at the secondary until one of those guys works out. The
Yep.
Nahshon Wright signing was, I think, a fun swing for value,
Yeah.
but I still think they can add some more to that secondary if they really want to turn this up.
Yeah. I agree. And like, I'm not blaming them for wanting veteran leadership. I'm just like, you know, is Demario Davis so much better than Bobby Wagner that you pay a premium to bring in Demario Davis? Like, yes, he's a better player to me, but like, is he $8 million a year better? I don't know. I mean, like, we'll see. Like, Davis is still a really good run defender. The Saints were like inexplicably the best 4th-and-1 run defense I've ever seen in my life last year. So and Davis was a big part of that. So like maybe they'll bring that to New York. They're with Nahshon Wright, they're gonna have more than one. They're gonna have an interception this year. They're gonna create more takeaways this year, so that's positive. I just like strike a balance between wanting to see them get better in defense and wanting them to build a sustainable, younger, long-term young defensive, and that's going to come in the draft with, some of these other signings, like Barry, Osai. Those are younger players as well. So definitely some positives for the Jets as well. Baltimore Ravens. I don't think we have to discuss the Max Crosby situation anymore. Trey Hendrickson comes in instead. Obviously, a less expensive player when you consider the draft capital. They signed John Simpson, Jalen Hawkins as well, but a lot of talent coming out of the building. Tyler Linderbaum, Isaiah Likely, Charlie Kolar, Draymond Jones, Alohi Gilman, Keaton Mitchell, Patrick Ricard. Leaving the Crosby situation aside, do you feel like the Ravens have done enough to address sort of the holes that were created by free agency this offseason so far?
I don't really think so, but I think it's interesting defensively what they've done.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, putting the Crosby trade aside, Trey Hendrickson in itself, he is going to immediately help their pass rush.
No
While I
question.
don't think that he is as impactful of a run defender as Crosby, and where I
Mm-hmm.
still think they need to address that run defense
Mm-hmm.
in the draft, he is going to provide instant pass rush and an instant winner, especially if Nnamdi Madubuike is not ready
Yeah.
yet to start the season. You have a guy who you can count on in those one-on-one situations. I like Jalen Hawkins for what he is, especially at safety. You can sort of play Kyle Hamilton as that nickel overhang that they really want to do, but have to
Right.
constantly keep moving them back and forth because you just don't have guys you can
Fix the
trust back
defense.
there. So having a guy back there you can trust is actually like, it'll help keep Kyle Hamilton closer to the action. I
Yeah.
am really worried about what they're doing offensively because
Mm-hmm.
it sort of felt like Linderbaum wasn't going to be re-signed, and he
Mm-hmm.
ended up going to the Raiders, obviously, but Losing Likely and Kolar is a massive hit to their depth at tight end. They signed Durham Smythe, but still, that seems more like a blocker at the tight end
Yeah.
spot, especially as Mark Andrews gets older. And
Yep.
now you have all three spots in the interior offensive line need to be addressed, need to be upgraded. Oh, well, two, since they signed John Simpson.
Sure.
So it's just, there's a lot of holes that still need to be filled. And it's sort of, I hope that they're able to do that through the draft, because I'm not sure who they're going to get at this point to help with that offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, like, I sit here and I'm like, okay, I trust the Ravens to develop interior offensive linemen. They've done it for years. They're good at it. I trust them to find interior defensive linemen who can hold up against the run. They've done that for years. They're pretty good at it. But they can't do that over and over again in the draft. Like, I mean, you can fill an offensive line spot with a rookie. You can fill a defensive line spot with a rookie. They need like 4 starters out of this draft. That's the part that I find concerning, especially if Montepique is not able to play to start the season. Not only do they need a starter then up front on the interior, but they need an impact starter. They need an impact interior pass rusher in the middle of the field. And I understand like they're going to be more active after June 1st because of the comp pick formula. Like they are going to, I think, be a little more aggressive there. But I agree with you. Like it feels like there's a lot of work to be done. And I mean, it's great. Like if you're an organization, just sit at the draft and be like, hey, yeah, we're going to get 4 starters out of this. We're fine. Like every team thinks that. The Ravens think it. They're really good at it, but I just don't know if they can actually pull that off come April.
Yeah, it's especially with this draft class where it's going to be tough to find those quality starters. I think this class has a lot of guys who I think can be like baseline level starters, like base players. But in terms of true impact guys, this might not be the draft to do that. So if we're talking about this being a multi-year sort of retooling, how much more of Lamar Jackson are you going to have left? Until you're able to actually like give this a full go with a team that's ready to help Lamar Jackson out.
Yeah, and they wanted to get the Lamar Jackson extension done. They did not do that. That was another thing that did not turn out for them well early in free agency. Cincinnati Bengals lose Trey Hendrickson to the Ravens, as we just mentioned. They lose Joseph Asai. Geno Stone leaves. Cam Taylor-Britt, after an up-and-down tenure in Cincinnati, moves on. Boye Mafe comes in. Brian Cook, Jonathan Allen, 3 major additions on the defensive side of the ball. Do you think they've done enough to, if not fix their defense, at least help what has been a disastrous Bengals defense take a major step towards league average?
I don't know if it's a major step towards league average yet, because there's still a lot of moving parts in the secondary that need to be filled, especially with who's going to play corner opposite DJ Turner. Are you going to give Dax Hill another season as that outside corner? Do you want him to play nickel? I think Brian Cook playing next to Jordan Battle, if Jordan Battle is even going to be a starter next season, is going to be pretty interesting. But I think what Boye Mafe offers is somebody who can win in pass rush situations. I'm not saying that he is Trey Hendrickson like light, but when you talk about a winner who can win with speed, win with length, win with bend, I think Mafe gives them a different style of pass rusher, at least to Shamar Stewart, Miles Murphy. I think he'll give them some more juice off the edge. I don't know what Jonathan Allen is going to be in 2026. He was pretty rough for the Vikings last season, so you're sort of hoping that you get whatever you can out of Allen. I still don't think that's like a major signing at this point. And they still have what might be one of the worst linebacker rooms in the league. So it's going to take them a long way to get from bottom of the NFL to league average. I still think they need to add more through the draft, but I would like to see them add post June 1st just to that defensive line room to sort of give them depth and give them some more pop, especially because Jonathan Allen just can't really stay healthy.
Yeah, but the tackling to me is the biggest problem with that team last year. Hopefully that has been fixed with the additions of players like Cook and Mafe. But yeah, they still have work to do. Whether that's the draft, which I think it is most likely to be, whether they do go out and get another pass rusher or 2 after June 1st, just feel like there's still work to be done in Cincinnati. Cleveland Browns, entire offensive line, we're good. No, thank you. They make a couple trades. They bring in Titus Howard. They sign Zion Johnson to what I found to be a curiously large contract. Elton Jenkins comes in from the Packers. They signed Quincy Williams from the Jets to replace Devin Bush, who moved on. Certainly like a team that is in transition. Like I don't think the expectations that the Browns are going to be, one great player away from being anything. But I mean, do you feel like this team is heading in the right direction?
I feel like even though it's a very, very, very small step, I do think they're headed in the right direction, at least with the
Mhm.
offensive line. You need to replace all 5 starters, and I think that they did that in a pretty good way. Titus Howard gives them guard tackle versatility.
Yep.
I like the Elton Jenkins signing, especially after or when they got him. Zion Johnson, it was a little fascinating how much he got, but
Yeah.
again, former first round pick. He
Mhm.
actually, I don't want to say he played great for them last season, but he
He
actually
got
was
better.
putting together like some pretty good reps for the
Mhm.
Chargers last season. And I think they've gotten to a point where you can tell through their free agency, like the defense is fine. They added
Mhm.
one player, and Quincy Williams is sort of the Devin Bush, like you said, replacement.
Mhm.
If you can just get somebody at left tackle, which I think they'll address, if you can get somebody at quarterback, and I think they're going to be active players in the whatever happens with Anthony Richardson, Will
Mhm.
Levis, whatever those
Mhm.
trade pools are, just to go add another body and just see what happens. Like really turn this into like Hell in a Cell for the starting quarterback job for the Browns. But I think they're sort of heading in the right direction in terms of we're building this out and we're going to see what happens with with one of the quarterbacks. If it works, cool. If not, we're right back at the top of the draft next year and we can go get our guy.
I think the Browns have been trapped in the cell for about 25 years at quarterback, getting just pounded on by people coming through the ring, through the top of the cage. There's people with bolt cutters coming through the doors and taking them out. I mean, it's been rough for them. I did pitch Walker Little via trade to the Browns. I still feel like that makes sense, although Jaguars might end up keeping Walker Little.
I think that makes sense. And I actually thought Walker Little would be a nice trade candidate for the Panthers before they
Yeah.
signed Rasheed Walker. But I
Mm-hmm.
do think that what they need when it comes to that tackle spot is I think they're going to try and look for the young cornerstone for the offense. I think
Yeah.
with everybody else that they signed is sort of like Zion Johnson's deal is pretty big, but I do think they're hoping that he can be at least like a serviceable starter, not like a core piece. But if they get that
Yeah.
core left tackle in this draft, where I mean, this left tackle pool in this draft class is pretty interesting. I'm not going to say it's
Mm-hmm.
great, but there's a lot of interesting players in that pool. I do think if you can get that, if you can leave the draft or the first round with your offensive tackle and a different body type at receiver.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of the shifty, quick guys outside of Cedric Tillman. I think they could
Mm-hmm.
use a bigger body on the outside. If you can leave with a different body type of receiver and your cornerstone left tackle out of the first round, I think you're in a pretty good spot to figure out what's going on with quarterback. This is a long-term build. They've said this a lot for the Browns. We have said this a lot for the Browns. It is a long-term build, but it's going to have to be.
Yeah, and they had the extra first round pick coming from the Jags in this draft as well. Pittsburgh Steelers. How can I say this nicely? Um, they live in a different reality than the one I live in, and it's fine. Like for the team the Steelers believe they are, they did exactly what you would want. Veteran cornerback Jamel Dean. Sure, we've had one of those every year. Why not? Contract's pretty reasonable. Really a 1-year deal. Rico Dowdle to be the rotation back after you let Kenny Gainwell leave. No problem with that move. They got a pretty good price on Jaquan Brisker. They pick up Michael Pittman basically as a salary dump at wide receiver with DK Metcalf. Don't know what they're going to do at quarterback. I know it's not going to be good, whatever they do at quarterback. But like, how do I want to ask this question without being insulting? To the Steelers, not to you, to be clear. Given what the Steelers are doing, like, do you think, given what it appears they believe they are, do you think they did a good job of constructing a roster that's going to achieve what their goals are, which appears to be strictly making the playoffs and nothing else?
If their goal is to go 10-7, 9-8, and play in wild card weekend, I mean, sure, but you still don't have a quarterback on the roster. And
That's
that's
a
the
problem.
biggest thing. You're still waiting for Aaron Rodgers to make a decision. And
Mm-hmm.
at this point, if I'm the GM of the Steelers, if I'm Omar
Mm-hmm.
Khan, you have to let this era of the Steelers go. I think it's time for this team to start turning over the leaves a little bit and starting to get younger, starting to change into a new era. But it feels like the Steelers have constantly been trapped in, oh, we can still do this. We can still
Mm-hmm.
go and win a Super Bowl this year. but you don't have the talent requisite to do that. Like the Michael Pittman trade in itself is fine, but what are you getting out of Michael Pittman this season? And how is he going to help complement a guy like DK Metcalf? I still think they should add to that receiver room because the depth behind DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman still isn't great. You still have a left tackle hole in Broderick Jones, who was not great last season, also was hurt, and your backup behind him was Dylan Cooks. So you still have that left tackle spot up for grabs. You still have the quarterback position up in the air. And you also downgraded at coach. So it feels like everything about this is like, we're just going to try and go 9-8. This is our like last dance moment to get everybody for one last run. But we said that last year and the year before that and the year before that. Eventually, you got to just let it go.
This would be like if the last dance was about the Bulls and they were like a 45-win team. And it was just like, yep, we are going to be the 8 seed in the Eastern Conference, the Houston Texans. Guess what? Their offensive line is bad and they want to fix it. They have made more changes. And I actually kind of like overall the moves they made. They move on from Titus Howard. They bring in Braden Smith to play right tackle. They re-sign Trent Brown. They sign Wyatt Teller to play guard. They bring in Evan Brown to kind of be their guard center utility lineman. They trade for David Montgomery. They gave up a 4th, a 7th round pick, and Juice Scruggs, which is a complicated trade that had 5th round value based on what I saw on social media. But do you think the Texans have finally fixed their offensive line and their run game for CJ Stroud?
I think in the short term, kinda. Like, really? I'm not going to sit here and say that it's completely like fixed. Everything's okay. I still would add to that offensive line in the draft. Now I continue to throw bodies at it until you get a long-term solution, because that's sort of what Wyatt Teller isn't at this point. Wyatt Teller is we're going to go try and win a Super Bowl before everybody on this roster gets expensive type of signing. You sign Braden Smith to go and just give you a starting caliber body to go and win a Super Bowl right now before you have to make the decision on CJ Stroud, before you have to pay Will Anderson Jr. what he's going to get. So it feels like in the short term, I think they did enough just to get their run game, or at least their offensive line, to passable for next year or for 2027. Now, beyond that, I still have a lot of question marks, because while the players that they signed on the offensive line are quality, or at least starting caliber, none of those guys can really stay healthy. So now you're playing a risky game with guys that are oft injured for one season in front of CJ Stroud to go try and win the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, Braden Smith coming off of a couple injury hit seasons. Wyatt Teller has been banged up the last couple of years. Trent Brown perennially an injury risk. It's interesting. I feel like it's easy to pick holes in the guys they added over the past couple of years, but it's also like, building an NFL offensive line from scratch is hard.
Yeah.
Like it's easier for me to pick them apart than to be like, oh, they didn't do enough, because there's just not a ton of great offensive linemen available via free agency and via trade. Now, admittedly, they traded away Laramie Tunsil, which made their life tougher, but we'll see. Like you said, I think they could still stand to add another offensive lineman, whether it be someone to compete with Ursary at left tackle, whether it be a guard who can maybe step in after Wyatt Teller does move on. But still work to be done for the offensive line with the Houston Texans. Indianapolis Colts spent a lot of money. Daniel Jones is back. Alec Pierce is back. They bring in Arden Key to replace Kwity Paye, who left. We just mentioned Braden Smith, who left for the Texans. They trade Zaire Franklin. Whew. I mean, put it this way, JP, if people don't know, you are a Jacksonville Jaguars fan. Are you scared of the Indianapolis Colts in the division right now? Oh no.
Not really scared, because this entire thing is relying on Daniel Jones to be the same Daniel Jones he was both pre-Achilles injury and pre-game 9 of the season. Like he has to be first half of the season Daniel Jones coming off of that Achilles. They're playing a really risky game. And well, I don't want to say like risky, because the deal in itself for Jones is essentially a 1-year deal. Like there's an easy way
1
to
year,
get
50
out of
million.
it. Yeah, it is what it is. They're going to try and go win a Super Bowl this season because you really don't have the picks to kind of stash and like move forward and try and build for the future because they belong to your pick this year belongs to who is it?
Jets.
The Jets. Yeah, their picks belong to the Jets moving forward. So you're really sort of in between a rock and a hard place where you can't really rebuild because your picks aren't your own, but you're also going to try and win a Super Bowl with a guy who may or may not be able to get you there off that injury, with a receiver room that's really thin outside of Alec Pierce and Josh Downs, and a defense that still now needs a lot of help in that linebacker room. So it feels like they're sort of, I don't want to doom them to this, but it feels like they might potentially be like speed running the Steelers, where you're just sort of running the hoop of 9-8 and 10-7, hoping you finally get that one breakthrough. But this feels still like a maybe wild card team.
Yeah. I mean, you said they're between a rock and a hard place, and like that's true. But like they were the ones who were on the rock and were like, oh, look, a hard place. We should head over there. And then they got stuck between those two places. Like they're the ones who did this. So I can't really give them too much sympathy for the situation they find themselves in. I do think there are pieces to like here. They have proof of concept. Like they were a really good offense for 8 games. That's a very huge outlier, I will say, in Daniel Jones's career. But I do think they have more work to do. I think if you're going to say you are all in to not win a Super Bowl, at least make a deep playoff run with Daniel Jones, like to not just strictly either go 8-9 or 9-8, like you have to act that way. And so they need more help on the edge. They should be looking for a Joey Bosa. They should be looking for, a help wide receiver. I don't know if they're going to get Stephon Diggs because of his off-field situation, but, could they go and add another wide receiver? I think they could, like, especially given that you don't have that first-round pick. So I think it's okay to go down the path they have. I just think they have to go further down that path if they really think that's going to be, if this year for them is deep playoff run or everyone's getting fired, we're basically rebuilding.
Yeah, this is going to be the deep playoff run, Super Bowl or bust sort of season for them. I do think adding another sort of edge rusher, it sort of reminds me of like when the Ravens would go and like sign Kyle Van Noy in August and he would go and get 13 sacks, or they'd sign Jadeveon Clowney and he would become a surefire like quality starter for them. Like they need to do one of those for that edge group. They need to find value in the post June 1st signings. But the problem is it's really tough to live that way constantly, like over and over. And we sort of saw it with the Ravens this past season. It's really hard to live in post June 1st vet signings because there's a reason those guys are still available.
Yeah.
Like you're playing a real risky game. So I think they're towing this line and they sort of have to toe this line, but it feels like they're teetering on the brink of like, this is gonna turn into a rebuild.
Yeah, and one of the ways you make that possible to thrive with those guys is you have Mike McDonald, who gets more out of those guys from the prior regime. I think Lou Anarumo is a good coach, but I don't think we saw with Cincinnati, he cannot make magic happen with just about anybody. Like he has to have at least some pieces to work with on the defensive side of the football. Here we are. It's Jags time. Always excited to get to this. A interesting offseason so far for the Jags. Nowhere near as active as they were last year, which is not surprising. The only signings they have made, I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, Chris Rodriguez and Derek Gardeck. Am I missing anybody?
Buster Brown.
Players?
They re-signed Buster Brown.
Oh, they re-signed Buster Brown. I'm saying new people coming into the organization. Would be only
new
those
people.
Two.
It's only Rodriguez.
They tried to sign Jake Bobo as a restricted free agent, which I appreciate. I love a good like mid-tier offer sheet where you're just like trying to be a little too much for a team. They did not get Jake Bobo, who would have been added to a very deep wide receiver room, but a lot of talent did walk out the door. Devin Lloyd left at linebacker. Travis Etienne left for the Saints. Greg Newsome, who they traded for in midseason, did not return. Jeremy Brown, not surprisingly, cut. But I sort of wonder, JP, like with the Jags, is there something coming you feel like it's going to change things for them? Or do you think, like I said, without a first round pick, do they think they feel good enough about their roster that they can run it back with what they have on the roster right now, plus day 2, day 3 picks, and be in position to compete for another division title?
I think they feel confident in their ability to run it back, especially given the fact that they have the wider margin for error, given the coaching that they have. They retained
Right.
all their staff,
Yep.
at least the head coach and both coordinator spots. And I
Yep.
feel like they sort of prepared for the inevitability that Travis Achan and Devin Lloyd were going to leave in free agency.
Yep.
That's why they drafted Bashal Tutin and LaQuint Allen last season.
Mm-hmm.
Devin Lloyd, for what he signed for, I was hoping that they would try and retain him, but it also felt like he was ready to leave Jacksonville. It's tough because Jacksonville came into this without a lot of cap space.
Yeah.
They're still in the sort of eat your vegetables portion of trying to get out from under all of Trent Baalke's contracts, and they really couldn't restructure a lot of people. In addition to that, they also are coming up on having to reward their own guys. Parker Washington is going to be eligible for an extension. Brenton Strange eligible for an extension. Trayvon Walker is going to get a lot of money coming up. So it feels like they're in this corner where they have to draft well and they have to use those day 2 picks. But the biggest thing for them is, I believe they have a lot of picks in day 2. They had the 56, they have 81, 88, and 100. So they have a lot of space to either move up or down in this draft if they wanted to. But again, it's sort of towing the line of, you're going to have to draft and draft well, which is sort of the Rams formula. You got to draft and draft well, especially when you don't have first round picks.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly the Rams, a lot of success drafting day 2, day 3. You can succeed and thrive there. Where do you want to see them focus in the draft? Like, is there a position or position group? Certainly, let's assume they're not trading Brian Thomas, which is what they have said, although I've tried many times to trade Brian Thomas for them. But I mentioned Walker Little, who's probably their swing tackle this year, who's expensive, who could get traded. But assuming that they keep everyone around, what do you want to see them address come draft weekend?
I want to see them address linebacker and secondary depth, especially because Travis Hunter is going to be primarily a corner, but for those reps that you need him at receiver, or those few times you need him at receiver, you're going to have to continue to add depth to that room. I think safety is going to be another spot where they need depth and some range and playmaking on the ball, because Antonio Johnson is better moving forward closer to the line of scrimmage. Eric Murray also might be better moving forward towards the line of scrimmage. They don't have like a center field guy in that room. You're hoping Caleb Bransall can become that, but he missed his entire rookie season with a foot injury. So he quickly becomes one of the Jaguars' most important players, because if he pans out, then you don't really have to add at the safety spot. You can focus on linebacker, where you have Foye Oluokun. I think they like Ventrell Miller, but I would like to see them add some more speed, some more playmaking to that linebacker room. And then very quietly, I think they've been trying to add like a different type of pass rusher. It's not to say that they don't like Trayvon Walker. I think they love Trayvon Walker, love Josh Hines Allen. But how we talked about how receivers have like basketball team, they all have the same body types. The Jaguars edge rushers are all the same body types and all win the same way. They just need somebody with a little more speed off the edge. If they can somehow get a guy like Jayshawn Barham from Michigan, who transitioned to edge from off-ball linebacker this season from Michigan, I think that'd make a lot of sense. I think if they can just add another guy who has some speed, I think that'd really help. But I'm looking more for depth, especially on defense.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the secondary in a good spot, but some of those guys are going to be entering what might be the last year with the Jags. Jordan Lewis, Eric Murray, both signed last year. Lewis played really well when he was healthy, but he missed a bunch of time with injuries. Eric Murray, on the player, Lewis as well, on the wrong side of 30. Those guys guaranteed money were inside after this season. You could draft their replacements this year. If they do have Hunter get hurt at cornerback, or if they do have injuries at cornerback, they're thin there. That seems like a logical place to go. Like you said, linebacker would make sense post Devin Lloyd. They could stand to add some more defensive line depth. I do think that's where I would be focusing, especially if they don't trade Little and they have him as a swing tackle. I think people are going to want that high profile running back, but I do think that's a day 2, day 3 situation. There's going to be backs available. I think Bashal Tunin showed enough last year that I want to see more. And clearly they paid Chris Rodriguez enough money that it's very apparent they think he's going to be a meaningful part of their running back rotation.
Yeah, I think with Rodriguez, I think he's going to be it sort of gets played out with running back rooms, but he is going to be the thunder to Tutin's lightning. With the way that he played, the familiarity with Liam Cohen's offense from their time at Kentucky, he is a tackle grinder. He is going to try and win between the tackles. That takes a lot of hits off of Tutin, who also couldn't stay healthy in his rookie season. So because he hasn't been able to stay healthy, just having someone who can take carries and take hits off of him, with LaQuint Allen coming in on passing downs and being their special teams ace, I think they think that their running back room is at least set for the next few years. Sure, they're going to add like a day 3 guy if they want LaQuint Allen to be more of a factor in the just true offense. But outside of maybe tight end, I don't think they're going to really add a lot to that offensive room.
Yeah, I agree. Tennessee, a team that has added a lot to their offensive rooms. Wan'Dale Robinson, Austin Schlottman, Daniel Bellinger, Mitch Trubisky. I like the defensive moves Tennessee made, and it's not like this reminds me a little bit of the Jags year where they spent a ton on Christian Kirk and they brought in Zay Jones, and it's like those guys were good players or helpful players for a Jags team that made the playoffs unexpectedly. But we were still sitting there a couple years later, like those guys didn't really move the needle. Like we still had the same problems for Trevor Lawrence. We still needed that Brian Thomas to make a difference. I sort of wonder when you have Wan'Dale Robinson, Daniel Bellinger, Mitch Trubisky, Austin Schlottman, all making, I believe, more than $34 million a year between the 4 of them. I know Kevin really took a pay cut to $12.5 million. I'm just sort of sitting here wondering as we approach the draft, do you think they've done enough to help Cam Ward, or do you think they have to also address the playmaker situation or the offensive line in the draft to feel like they can feel like he has enough around him come 2026?
I think I'd still be adding to that offensive room on the line, on skill positions going into the draft, because I just don't think the room is still good enough. Like, you paid Wan'Dale Robinson $17 million a year, which is a lot of money for a guy who is a slot only, who also doesn't really he had one great season where he's like actually doing stuff downfield, but he also sort of fits the same like body types of the guys they already had on the roster before. You still have Calvin Ridley on the roster, but I don't know what you're going to get out of Calvin Ridley at this stage. And it just feels like they're sort of people made the joke about it on social media, but they're just signing the guys that got them fired in their previous spots. And I don't know if that's the best thing to do, but I just feel like their offensive room still needs some more juice, some more explosiveness. We haven't even talked about the offensive line that I think has maybe 2 like locked in starters. I think Peter Skoronski is your quality starting left guard. I think JC Latham is going to get another year at right tackle. It's tough to live in a world where you only have 2 offensive linemen that are like quality starters and they're both young guys, because you paid $20 million to Dan Moore and that didn't pan out. So I would still be adding to that receiver room. I'd still be adding to the skill position areas and the offensive line, because you have to insulate Cam Ward to give him as much of a shot as possible.
Yeah, and I think Robert Saleh's defense is going to be okay. Getting Franklin Myers, a lot of money, but best defensive tackle on the market. They add Jermaine Johnson. That gives them another piece on the edge. The corner room, I think Alontae Taylor in the slot, most likely. Cordell Flott outside. Those are good cornerbacks. Like I really think the defense is going to be okay. I just think we're going to be sitting, unless they make a major addition this in the draft, I feel like we're going to be sitting here next year being like, man, they just need to get that guy for Cam Ward. They don't have that guy yet. And maybe that guy wasn't available. Maybe Alec Pierce was not going to be that player, but I don't know. I just would have liked to see them get another big piece. We'll see what happens for them in the draft. Denver Broncos did get a big piece. They trade for Jalen Waddle, first and a 3rd round pick, and a swap of 4th rounders. Otherwise, very quiet. They re-signed J.K. Dobbins, Alex Singleton. They let Dre Greenlaw leave. John Franklin Myers is really the only notable piece on defense who moves on for a significant deal elsewhere. So Broncos basically running it back, swapping out Waddle for Franklin Myers in terms of salary. Do you think they are in a better spot than they were a year ago?
I think offensively they are.
Sure.
And I'm a big fan of the Jalen Waddle deal, even though they had to
Mhm.
give up their first round pick. And a lot of people were like, that was really pricey for Waddle. But when you look at it from the lens of Patrick Mahomes is not going to be playing for a majority
Mm.
of the season for the Chiefs. The Bills and the Ravens are going through identity and scheme and regime changes. This is the year to go win and go
Yeah.
to a Super Bowl. This is the year to go do it. And especially for the Broncos, while Bo Nix is on his rookie deal,
Mhm.
go get him everything that you need. If Bo Nix is going to be your guy, get him everything that you need to go win a
Mhm.
Super Bowl. I think Waddle complements what Courtland Sutton does in the offense really well. And I think Sean Payton has been trying to find and like sort of create Jalen Waddle in the aggregate via Troy Franklin and Marvin
Yeah.
Mims, and just hasn't worked. Now he's actually got that guy. I am a little bit worried about their non-additions on defense. I mean,
Mhm.
you let Dre Greenlaw walk. That sort of felt like a foregone conclusion, but
Yeah.
bringing back Stranad and Alex Singleton, I think they need some more speed in
Yeah.
that linebacker room. And then losing Franklin Myers is going to be a big blow, but I do think they have the depth. I think they have the coaching to sort of overcome that. But this offense, I mean, I'm not going to say they're like Super Bowl caliber, but this team was a fractured
Yeah.
ankle away from the
Yep.
Super Bowl. And in a world where Patrick Mahomes probably is going to be playing the majority of the season,
Mhm.
go win it now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's totally defensible to be aggressive and get a Jalen Waddle versus just holding on to your first round pick and drafting a wide receiver. I think given where you were, like we can quibble about the price, and I do think that it's probably more than I would have wanted to pay. And I can make the case, hey, like they're not going to be as good as they were because they were good in close games. They relied on their defense. Like that stuff does matter, but like the way to fix that is to make your underlying level of play better. And that was their biggest need, was adding a wide receiver with verticality, with speed, with ability after the catch. I do think Jalen Waddle was the right fit for them given the circumstances. So I can't fault them for making that move. Kansas City Chiefs, as you mentioned, in transition, Patrick Mahomes potentially not playing for a chunk of 2026. The quarterback who will be taking over in that case is Justin Fields, who was acquired for a 6th-round pick. They bring in Kenneth Walker, get some explosiveness from the running back position, which was much needed given what they'd been doing there the last couple of years. But I want to ask you about the defensive side of the football. Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, Brian Cook, Leo Chenal, Derek Doty, Charles Omenihu, Mike Dano, all gone. Can this defense hold up while Patrick Mahomes is out long enough for the offense to get right once Mahomes comes back?
I'm not really sure, and it's tough because they have Chris Jones, and that's going to
Yep.
raise your floor a little bit, especially because he's Chris Jones. But it just feels like their offseason is sort of paying the price for being so far over the cap and
Yeah.
trying to win a Super Bowl in earlier seasons, which obviously like they would
They
do it
did.
again. They'd
Of
do it again
course.
multiple times because it worked. But now it's sort of like it's the come down a little bit. You gotta like we said the Dolphins, you gotta eat your vegetables a little
Mhm.
bit. So I think that this defense is going to have to readdress that cornerback room. They gotta add multiple guys, and I
Mhm.
think they still can in this draft. I think the biggest question for me is, will Spags go out and get a different type of pass rusher? Because
Mhm.
Ashton Gelati, George Karlaftis all win very similarly. And I think with where Chris Jones is at as a pass rusher, he is your instant winner. But the
Yep.
problem is, if you double him, nobody's winning in one-on-one situations
Yeah.
without using speed to power. They need somebody with some speed, with some bend, somebody who can win in those one-on-one situations. But I
Mhm.
wonder if it's going to take Spags going away from the bigger body types that he likes on the edge to go and like actually address that.
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted Jalen Phillips for them. Obviously, the price tag it costs, that was never going to be an option for Kansas City, given their circumstances. And they've paid a lot of guys. Like Chris Jones is making a massive contract at defensive tackle. They paid Nick Bolton last year. They pay Karlaftis. They obviously have Patrick Mahomes making a lot of money. Their offensive line is getting as a few really highly paid guys. Like they had to pick and choose. And so I don't fault them for what they did. I think Trent McDuffie's trade was kind of inevitable given the circumstances. They don't spend a ton of money at cornerback, but it just feels like so much to fix in one offseason. Kind of like the Ravens, where you're like, okay, They have more draft capital than the Ravens, thankfully, but it's like, is Brett Veach really going to draft 4 starters on defense in this draft? If he does, they're going to be great. But like if he doesn't, it's going to be a work in progress for Kansas City. So just a tough spot for them. Like you said, I think maybe just circumstances leading to kind of not a rebuilding year, but maybe a retooling year in Kansas City. Las Vegas Raiders, again, Max Crosby situation happens. We can leave that aside. They spent a lot otherwise. Tyler Linderbaum comes in as the biggest ticket free agent, but a lot on defense. Quiddy Paye, Quay Walker, and Nakobe Dean at linebacker. Eric Stokes, who I think had a really good year last year, re-signed a cornerback. Malcolm Kuntz comes back on a 1-year deal. Really on offense, outside of Linderbaum, the only addition they've made so far is Jalen Naylor. So is this just a Raiders draft to you where it's just Fernando Mendoza and pieces for Fernando Mendoza up and down the board, or do you think they still might consider adding some more on the defensive side of the football?
I don't think they're going to add to the defensive side of the ball early in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's going to be used to get Fernando Mendoza, obviously, and then get help for Fernando Mendoza that fits in the offense. Because with the way that they spent on defense, I actually am kind of excited to see what this Raiders defense looks like. Like it looks fun on paper. I think the idea of Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker together gives them a lot of versatility. I think they're going to be really good blitzing, like a blitzing team. And it's sort of funny to think that they might have done that because they knew they were losing Max Crosby. But you add Max Crosby back to this defense and like, I don't know.
They're going to get after
fun.
Dudes.
Like,
no question.
I could talk myself into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, they're going to get after dudes up front. Secondary is very much a work in progress, but like I said, Stokes was really good last year. That's going to make their life easier. I just, they have a lot of young wide receivers. Maybe you're hoping Jack Bech takes a step forward. I think Trey Tucker is totally fine in like the, wind sprint guy role. Obviously, Brock Bowers is going to be the focal point of your passing attack. Ashton Jeanty hopefully taking a big step forward, but still kind of feels like even though you signed Spencer Burford, even though you have Jackson Powers Johnson still, they probably need a right tackle. They probably need a swing tackle. They could stand to add another guard. Like it could be quarterback, wide receiver, offensive lineman with their first 5 picks. I don't think anybody would bat an eye or be upset about it.
I'm really curious what happens at right tackle for them because this is a new head coach, but it is still John Spytek's team. And I wonder what they think of Charles Grant. Their 3rd round pick last year from William & Mary. I was a big fan of him entering the draft last season, but it was clear that he wasn't ready for starting reps yet because he just didn't have the size to play. In this offense that's more wide zone base, that was very similar to what Charles Grant ran at William & Mary, I wonder if they believe in him. It'd be cool if they did, but again, you're placing a lot of faith in a guy that didn't really play at all last season to come in and immediately be your starter and immediately be like a quality starter for you. So I would still address that right tackle spot just to give them some competition in the room. But I mean, if you can go Mendoza, receiver, offensive line, like just keep throwing picks at the offensive line until it works out, I think that'd be a win for the Raiders.
Yeah, I mean, Charles Grant, Caleb Rogers both drafted in the 3rd round last year, and it felt like, I can tell you, if you didn't watch the Raiders, their offensive line was not good, and those guys were not getting on the field. I think told you what they felt about them right now. Obviously, like you said, I think a really good point about the move to the wide zone scheme under Clint Kubiak. You want more athleticism from your linemen. That plays into what Charles Grant showed in the past at college. So still work to be done. But I think a fascinating offseason for the Raiders in a lot of ways. And then Los Angeles Chargers, I really like what they did. Very clear on offense. They want to be able to run the football. They make moves to do that. They signed Tyler Biadasz to play at center. They bring in Alec Ingold from Miami. They bring in Mike McDonald. They sign Charlie Kolar to be their blocking tight ends. Like, you can see the bones of a really good run game for the Los Angeles Chargers.
The mind meld of Mike McDaniel's speed, like under center, like wide zone offense with Jim Harbaugh's offensive ideas, I'm so excited to see how that sort of pans out. It sort of feels to me like they're sort of similar to where the Seahawks were entering the draft last year, where they're in a position where if they could take Vega Ioane, if he falls to 22, it feels like he'd be sort of the Gray Zabel, where you just throw him in there and it's just a mute button for the rest of the season. And that could be the one piece that helps lift them to potentially a Super Bowl. Again, Patrick Mahomes is not going to be playing for a chunk of this season. The Bills and the Ravens are going to be major question marks going into this season. If the Chargers are going to do it and like go to a Super Bowl this year, it's going to have to be now. And I think that the Chargers also understand that, because you still have Justin Herbert, obviously very good quarterback. You have Joe Walt coming back, Rashawn Slater coming back. I think Biotish is a really good signing. Cole Strange has familiarity with McDaniel's offense. And I think losing Odafe Oweh is going to matter a little bit more than people think because of just the pass rush juice he gave them. But the defensive bones are going to remain the same. If they can just add that guard, that left guard, that offense could be one of the best in the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, the upside's there for sure. Chris O'Leary taking over for Jesse Minter, questions about the defense just in terms of like how much better was Jesse Minter making some of the players on that defense. So many guys came to the Chargers over the past couple of years and looked better in Los Angeles than they had elsewhere. We'll see if that keeps up. Certainly, you would want to give them the benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise. But like you said, the defense might not have to even be all that great if they can just get the offensive line healthy and they could add maybe one more piece to the interior. I don't want to see a full Trevor Penning season at left guard. I know there's some sickos who do. I'm past that point of my life, but just so many fun pieces on this Los Angeles Chargers team. Let's finish up. JP, do you want to give me a favorite and least favorite offseason so far from your 16 teams in the AFC?
So my favorite offseason actually might be the Raiders, even with all of the Max Crosby stuff that went on. Obviously, Tyler Linderbaum making tackle money at center is really, really rich. But when you are the Raiders, you're going to have to overpay. And I think they did have to go dig deep into the bag a little bit. But he is a perfect fit for what Clint Kubiak wants. And then, like we said, I'm really excited about what that defense is going to be. When it comes to least favorite, I'm going to go with the Steelers just because I just feel like it feels like they still think they still got it. They're the Unk still got it meme. Like, does he think he still has it? They're going to run it back. They're going to try and cobble it together. I have no doubt in my mind they're probably going to go like 9-8 again or go 10-7 and get blasted out of the playoffs. But at what point does it just become like enough is enough?
Yeah. You would think Mike Tomlin retiring would be like, okay, we tried to squeeze that one more long playoff run with Tomlin out. Now we can move on. We can hire that great young defensive coach that we always seem to find. We're going to move on. We're going to start over. We're going to trade a couple big veteran pieces. We got some really exciting young players on both sides of the football. We're building around them. We're going to get our quarterback. No, we are running it back. Just adding Mike McCarthy and a couple other vets to the mix.
Just change Mike.
Steelers were also, it's a Mike downgrade for sure. I can promise you. Steelers are also going to be my pick for maybe the most frustrating offseason. Certainly not like they didn't add talented players. I like Jamel Dean. I think Jaquan Brisker signings are really valuable, a really good signing for that price in terms of value, but just like a total disconnect between reality and where they perceive themselves. I actually would say the Chargers might be my favorite. I really like the offensive additions they made. Very clear strategy. Not that they spent a ton of money. Like, they weren't like going out and getting superstars, but like for the vision of what they needed to do to build the identity of what they wanted, it's so easy to see how they could be a really fun offense this year with the pieces they've added. So I would say Chargers, but a lot more time still to come. Draft still to come. Plenty of signings still to come, especially after June 1st, like we've been talking about because of the compensatory pick formula. JP, I believe you will be covering all of this stuff between now and the inevitable June 2nd AJ Brown trade. Where can people check out your coverage of all that stuff?
You can find me primarily at CBS Sports Pushing the Pile. We have shows Monday and Wednesday, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me on CBS Sports HQ, CBS Sports Network, and I do occasionally write for CBSSports.com. I have a story about Arvell Reese coming out tomorrow, so make sure you just follow along, see what I'm doing.
JP, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.